Hi, I'm Taylor, and I run the small business ET Designs, where we specialize in hand pouring scented candles that we pair with a curated playlist to create unique and relaxing atmospheres to experience in your home. Today, I'm tackling a sticky issue that I see spread around a lot on the internet, but not really talked about too deeply, which is the idea that essential oils are healthier in scented candles and synthetic fragrance oils are inherently toxic in scented candles. And sadly, this is a topic I see pushed by other candle makers onto unassuming and scared customers as a fear tactic, usually to help sell their own products, but more on that a little bit later. So I wanted to dive in and get into the nitty-gritty of where this idea came from, if there's any truth to it, and present the facts and research of this topic to help dispel any fear-based marketing myths and provide you, the candle lover and consumer, with more information. And the first thing I want to address when talking about this topic is to never trust the AI answer only. You know, when you're doing a Google search and now it's forced upon us to look at an AI overview of the answer of whatever we're searching instead of just showing the articles that talk about whatever we're researching. Yeah, don't trust that. It's not a source. It's not reputable. It'll try to mangle together an answer that it thinks you want to hear based on how you phrased it, what words you're using. It'll pretty much just tell you what you want to hear. But that's not fact and that's not truth. So there are a lot of opinions out there that all essentially boil down to a similar point of essential oils are good for candles, synthetic fragrance oils, bad, toxic, harmful to you and anybody who even gets near them. So I'm going to be operating off of looking at this one website that's titled The Dangers of Synthetic Fragrance Oils in Candles. Now this goes into my overall point and I'll connect the dots a little bit later. This article is written by a candle company. So that doesn't mean that it's been fact-checked by any means, not been looked at by any actual scientists, hasn't even done a study or any sort of research on this topic. But there's a whole article here talking about all the dangers of synthetic fragrance oils. So I'm just using this to base a lot of the points that a lot of people make when they bring this topic up. But this is in no way me trying to shade this candle company. This is a very popular topic that's being passed around the internet a lot, and they're not the only ones, but this is just one that really highlights all the points well, and so I'm going to use this as my frame of reference. So one of the first things it mentions, the truth is most store-bought candles contain synthetic fragrance oils, toxic additives, and paraffin wax, ingredients that release harmful pollutants into your air every time you light a wick. So this mentions store-bought candles specifically, and to that point, I would actually agree. But when we're talking about store-bought candles, we're not talking about candles made by like small businesses or handcrafted candles. We're talking about candles made and sold by places like Target, Walmart, Bath and Body Works, Marshalls, Home Goods, etc., any sort of place of that nature. And I would agree with that statement solely because those places are always very vague about the materials they used in their candles. When we try to look online at the product specifications, a lot of them will say paraffin wax blend or plant-based wax blend, which is super vague. Also no indicator as to what fragrance oils they're using. They just usually say very high quality, globally sourced, made in the USA. Whereas a lot of small candle brands base their brands on transparency of their ingredients, their methods, where they source their products from, which is good. We should definitely always strive for transparency whenever possible, honesty, authenticity, to let our customers know that we're putting out the highest quality product with their health in mind. So on that front, I would agree and always encourage people to shop for small candles rather than just picking it up on your Target or Walmart trip. Not that we're shopping at Target anymore, but I digress. But now I want to dive in a little bit even on some of these points that they mentioned of synthetic fragrance oils, toxic additives, and paraffin wax, because when they're put in bold like this and someone who makes candles is telling you that these things are bad and you should stay away from them, that immediately will create a sense of fear when we don't really know if that's always the case or always really valid. So I'll be honest, when I started researching for this video, I was also among the train of people that thought that paraffin wax was inherently toxic and a worse wax option to choose from out of all the waxes that there are. Well, let's go into that a little bit. So to understand what we're talking about, let's go into a little bit what paraffin wax actually is. According to Candle Science, production of paraffin wax starts with a multi-step process known as fractional distillation. Petroleum is first separated into compounds called fractions. What ultimately becomes paraffin wax belongs to the residue fraction. The residue fraction is then refined to remove impurities like oil, colorants, and aromatic compounds. The final step involves chilling the wax to filter out certain hydrocarbons, which result in the soft, solid consistency characteristics of paraffin candle wax. And while there are various types of petroleum wax byproducts, the paraffin wax used in candle making is known as fully refined paraffin. Fully refined paraffin undergoes a stringent purification process, including steps like hydrofinishing and clay filtration. Less refined types of petroleum-derived waxes include slack wax, which contains 3 to 50% oil, and scale wax, which contains up to 3% oil. Now, this is the important part. While it's true that less refined paraffin waxes contain impurities and undesirable compounds, reputable candle suppliers only offer fully refined paraffin wax. Then this article goes into whether paraffin wax is toxic or not. And they make a point to mention that while less refined waxes like slack and scale wax are not suitable for candle making, fully refined paraffin wax is chemically very different. Then they reference this study from 2007, known as the Oecometric Wax and Emissions Study, where investigators examined and tested emissions from paraffin, soy, stearin, and beeswax. The summary of that study states that well-made candles of all major wax types exhibit the same clean burning behavior and pose no discernible risk to human health or indoor air quality. They also mention from the study that the combustion byproducts of the waxes studied were virtually identical in composition and quantity, with all emission levels registering far below the most restrictive of any applicable indoor air standards, my bad. Then to go even further, because this has been such a controversial topic with paraffin wax, they also studied the soot production that these candles gave off, namely soy and paraffin. So what they did is they overwicked, which means they used a wick that is too big for the vessel that you're using, and they analyzed those emissions. And they found that the overwick candles produced greater levels of the emissions compounds, but they were still far below applicable air quality standards. And this is really a very important point to hammer home, because when we talk about clean burning candles, non-toxic candles, it sometimes gets boiled down in the conversation to the wax type, where this study is proving that soot production has nothing to do with wax type. It has everything to do with the wick size that you're using, which is why it's so important as candle makers that we test our candles and we wick our candles appropriately because now we know that overwicking your candles can result in more soot production. However, for paraffin meeting the claims that it's not as toxic, oh my God, my brain, I haven't even smoked. So for paraffin being able to beat the claim that it's not more toxic than other candle waxes, it still can't outrun its environmental impacts and the concerns around that. Candle Science also makes an interesting point at this though. Not only is petroleum a non-renewable source, but the ways it's extracted negatively impact the environment. Drilling, fracking, and oil spills result in habitat destruction, water pollution, and ecosystem disruption, and that only covers a small portion of the problems with the petroleum industry. However, petroleum isn't extracted solely to make paraffin wax. Instead, paraffin wax is just one of the many byproducts that can be made from petroleum. Crude oil will continue to be extracted regardless of market needs for paraffin wax. So until the petroleum industry radically changes, the amount of byproducts that can be made from already extracted crude oil is one of the few positive aspects of the petroleum industry. Using byproducts that would otherwise be discarded is generally a positive when it comes to sustainability, and for that, I would agree. So what we've learned so far, the claim that paraffin wax is more toxic than other candle waxes is simply not true and is a fear-mongering marketing tactic. Whether these brands actually know of this research or not, I don't know, but they're contributing to a larger issue of spreading misinformation and fear among people who don't research this information themselves. So for paraffin wax, the conclusion is, use it or don't at your own discretion and conscience, but to market it that it's more toxic than other waxes is simply untrue, scientifically speaking. Although I know a lot of people nowadays don't like to believe in science. Don't be like them. So if paraffin wax isn't toxic in candles that give us headaches or make us feel sick, then the only remaining culprit is the fragrance used. So now back onto our original topic of this video. So the candle company advocating against synthetic fragrance oils also mentions that synthetic fragrance oils are bad because they contain over 100 undisclosed chemicals, known respiratory irritants, endocrine disruptors, carcinogens, and other toxins. Now again, that sounds really scary if you're reading that and you don't really know what all those words exactly mean, but you've seen some of those words floating around on social media being labeled as bad, bad, bad. Because of course, no one wants to be willingly inhaling toxins, but that's pretty vague, so let's break that down point by point, shall we? Over 100 undisclosed chemicals. Actually, that is also simply not true, because all fragrance oils have to provide these things called safety data sheets that give full breakdowns of ingredients, potential hazards, safety information, cleanup information about each individual fragrance oil. So each fragrance oil that's listed on a fragrance oil website has to have one of these safety data sheets, okay? And if you want more info on how to specifically read these safety data sheets, because let's be for real, they're not very user-friendly to read, here's a link that will give you a step-by-step breakdown on like what each of the sections of the safety data sheet means. So already, over 100 undisclosed chemicals in a fragrance oil blend. Not true. Every chemical used in a fragrance oil is listed on the safety data sheet. So to say that there's over 100 undisclosed chemicals in that would have to assume that these fragrance oil companies are lying on their safety data sheets and including a whole bunch of chemicals that we just don't know about and are not including them in the safety data sheet, which is just an outrageous claim to make with no proof. So the next point, known respiratory irritants. I actually didn't really know what they meant by this because this is pretty vague, so I did a little Google of what are some known respiratory irritants in the home, and I got ammonia, animal dander, dust, nitrogen, chlorine, carbon dioxide, formaldehyde, sulfur dioxide, methane, helium, etc. And yeah, some of these are definitely bad, but these are also definitely all things that we never find inside of our homes. Endocrine disruptors, carcinogens, and other toxins. Again, vague as fuck, but it seems that when people mention endocrine disruptors or carcinogens in candles, they're mainly talking about phthalates, benzene, and toluene. Also, just as a little side tangent to this conversation, if you're doing research on stuff like this and you find an article like this one that mentions that some of these chemicals can cause ADHD in children, immediately discard that article because it's no longer trustworthy. Moving on. So again, if we go to Candle Science, which is a company that we use pretty frequently for sourcing our fragrance oils, if you go to any fragrance oil on their website and look under the specifications of the fragrance oil, many, if not all, at this point, fragrance oils, synthetic fragrance oils, are made with phthalate-free guarantees. And this is common across several different fragrance oil websites. They all mention being phthalate-free, mention being free of any acute toxins. So again, when these candle companies are saying that synthetic fragrance oils are full of phthalates and carcinogens, it's just simply not true. Science literally is disagreeing with you, yet these candle companies are dying on these hills of misinformation just to make their products seem like they're a step above everybody else. So again, this isn't a personal attack on this candle company that I'm referencing. There are countless candle makers that I stumble across daily on the internet that perpetuate this misinformation. And it just boils my blood so much that I wanted to do a long form video to really just get it all out there and try and end this war on synthetic fragrance oils so we can all just enjoy our candles in peace. And I have a problem with fear-based marketing, especially in this day and age. So now let's go into essential oils a little bit in candles. And the weird part is that a lot of people seem to agree that essential oils in candles are actually bad. Now, I'm not a scientist, nor do I want to pose as one, but I do believe scientists. So here's a study that was done that tested the volatile chemicals released in essential oil cold diffusion, not scented candles. And what they found is that yes, essential oils, similar to fragrance oils, probably release some volatile chemicals into the air. But the question is whether these are safe for human contact on a, we'll say, daily basis. And they found, you guessed it, that the concentration of volatile chemicals in room air diffused by a common ultrasonic diffuser analyzed in the study is safe even for repeated use. And at this point, it's more just personal preference and finding out how your body reacts to these different chemicals. Because for me personally, before I started making candles, I also bought into the idea that essential oil candles are like healthier or just better quality than candles made with synthetic fragrance oils. But those essential oil candles would always give me a headache and they would always make me feel sick and they'd always make the room feel more stuffy than dispersing a yummy aroma. So for me, the essential oil candles were a no-go. But for other people, that may work well with their bodies. So with this, I'll just say, do you, do what works for you. You don't need to shame or judge or put any sort of like lesser ideas onto other people who do different things, because those things just may work for them that don't work for you, and that's fine. So we figured out that paraffin wax isn't as toxic as everybody claims it is. Same with synthetic fragrance oils. So why do we still get inundated with this messaging that says otherwise? One is that the messaging is coming from people who just want to sell their own products, courses, coaching through fear-based marketing tactics. But there's another darker side to this that I want to address too, that I think has a very substantial impact on this: the clean living movement.
Coincidence that clean beauty is trending as we're returning to more conservative ideologies in America. Let's think about the unregulated terms we often hear in marketing around clean beauty: clean, non-toxic, purity. In Nazi Germany, the regime pushed the idea that clean living was essential for preserving the purity of the Aryan race. Think unprocessed foods and rejecting synthetic products. Advocating for a return to natural methods to preserve the nation's health sounds familiar. Nazis also used beauty standards and health practices as a means of societal control, equating appearance, diet, and lifestyle with moral superiority. Nazi aesthetic emphasized symmetry, physical fitness, natural beauty. Hitler preferred a natural woman. He rejected a made-up woman. He discouraged makeup. Whenever I see this photo, it just to me looks so similar to this infographic that's been going around about the mouth taping trend. The Skinny Confidential literally sent this out in a marketing email. So let's recap. Nazi Germany promoted natural living as a moral and ideological duty. Makeup, synthetic products, and modern cosmetics were discouraged in favor of a clean aesthetic. Clean girl aesthetic, anyone? Now, before I go any further, I want to clarify that just because you subscribe to this aesthetic or just because you like using clean beauty products or if a brand promotes clean beauty doesn't mean that I think you're a Nazi or a fascist. Whenever we're looking around at the current political landscape and saying, how did we get here? I think it's irresponsible to not look at trends and language and how they reflect deeper ideological shifts. Because beauty and wellness trends aren't just about aesthetics. They're a mirror of cultural values, fears, and power structures. When we see the rise of rhetoric around purity, cleanliness, non-toxic, natural living, especially alongside growing distrust in science and institutions, it's worth asking, what larger movement is this feeding into?
The clean living movement has taken social media by storm, advocating for chemical-free, health-conscious, more puritist living. This is seen in trends like minimalist living, eating unprocessed foods, maintaining a clean home, and using non-toxic home products like candles with essential oils or simmer pots. Many people and influencers have taken to this trend blindly because on the surface, it sounds like a great thing to advocate for our own personal health and healthy products. But the trick about things that are too good to be true, they usually are too good to be true. Because while we get flooded with clean girl content, no one stops to question, where did this line of thinking emerge and who stands to benefit from this messaging? According to an article posted from the National Library of Medicine, during the late 19th century, a clean living movement emerged in the US dominated by efforts to control alcohol consumption, tobacco use, and females' reproductive health. The movement also advocated proper diet, exercise, and physical fitness, pure water, and moderation in caffeine and red meat. Remarkably similar concerns have emerged again in contemporary American society. The current movement lacks central organization, but rather reflects a loosely related coalition of single-issue advocacy groups. Yet the focus seems remarkably similar to the 19th century movement: legislative limitation of individual choice regarding personal health behavior, particularly with substance use and female reproductive health. And this is not the first time that American society has seen a sort of clean movement like this. Cycles of social reforms have been observed in religion, politics, the economy, and other areas of human endeavor. Reforms to clean up society in regards to issues related to health also appear to come in cycles. Reform campaigns during clean living movements include anti-alcohol, sexual purity, diet, physical exercise, eugenics, public health, and anti-tobacco and drug campaigns. Interest in these issues rise and fall more or less simultaneously and often follow a religious awakening in which both evangelical sentiments and the development of new sects emerge. The movements also coincide with episodes of xenophobia and moral panic in which various minorities are targeted as undesirable influences for medical or moral reasons. And we can even draw example from a similar cleaning social movement in the 70s, which was marked by a time of free love, the age of the hippie, recreational drug use, social progress. For example, women's liberation was countered by pro-family movement. The use of marijuana and other drugs was followed by the war on drugs. Lowering of the drinking age was followed by raising of the drinking age. Non-marital sexual activity was challenged by a new purity movement, and legal rights to obtaining abortions, pro-choice, were met with agitation against abortion, pro-life. So when we really look at it, these clean movements, which is part of where this idea that essential oil candles are healthier and less toxic than candles made with synthetic fragrance oils, is ultimately derived from. The idea that synthetic fragrances being made by man-made chemicals is inherently toxic. So we're going to revert back to a simpler form of healthier living made with less chemicals, more natural products, but that doesn't always mean that the products gel well, or that it actually is inherently healthier for you, because American history is no stranger to propaganda on many fronts. Now I want to share an article written by Naomi Bias, sorry if I mispronounced that, called The Violent Nature of Purity and Cleanliness. Cleanliness is multifaceted, as it is a marketing tool that propels false narratives to urge customers to adopt a clean lifestyle for proposed health and wellness benefits. Yet this advocates for a one-size-fits-all trend that reinforces exclusion, prejudices, and the creation of separate communities. This example of trendy minimalism becomes a part of identity. When describing minimalism, it's often associated with art, fashion, or lifestyle trends that are all about simplicity and details that can't stand out, meaning less is more. Therefore, the clean lifestyle is another form of minimalism. One I argue is a limited lifestyle that attempts to over-glamorize natural qualities. The clean lifestyle trend manifested from TikTok. And I'll throw in Instagram because Instagram is pretty bad with it too. My generation, the generation of kids that grew up surrounded by social media, the epidemic of school shootings, and the constant reminders of tragedies such as 9/11 are now heavily involved in consumer trends, buying into obsessive self-care habits advertised on social media. Society puts together labels such as pale, white, and all natural as representative factors of having a clean image. When you are on the opposite side of these requirements, it can imply there's an alternate dirty girl aesthetic, where being unkempt shows poor social standing. This engages issues of contemporary discrimination and a minimal representation of people of color. This is alienating to BIPOC women, fat women, women with acne-prone skin, women with disabilities, older women, and so forth. The aesthetic punishes those who don't fit this very specific idea of what clean means and looks like. And when you look at it on social media, I didn't have to look hard and long to find the clean girl to conservative woman pipeline. Because while you're advocating for the same thing, some people are advocating for it in a bit of a different way with different tones underneath it. Because while some people also advocate for this clean, natural living aesthetic, they also advocate for traditional gender values, specific appearance trends, limitations of expression and choice in personal ways and legislatively. Because which side again was it that has a problem with women choosing what to do with their own bodies? Now, I'm not trying to bash anyone who's trying to just be healthier for themselves and try to limit their exposure to harmful things in their day-to-day lives. That's great. So here's my official takeaway. Do whatever works for you and your conscience, but it stops there. If you want to live a minimalist life because your brain gets overstimulated with clutter, do it. If you want to put on a simmer pot instead of burning a candle, that's amazing. Post the recipe so I can try it too one day. But where it becomes a problem is when we try to spread untrue, harmful messaging alongside our lifestyle choices in an attempt to sway people to your line of thinking that isn't applicable to everyone's situations and experiences. So all in all to say, all I'm advocating for is people to stay in their lane, stop unnecessarily attacking other people's lanes just because it's not the one you're in, do some damn research before speaking, and listen to science over your feelings. So we took a lot of twists and turns to get here, but ultimately we've come to the conclusion that paraffin wax and synthetic fragrance oils have been overhyped to be more toxic than they actually are, because science has proven that they're not. And while this line of messaging will never stop, because I also am unable to sway everybody who posts these things into seeing the light, essentially, I just hope that you, as a candle consumer and just a person living in this world that's full of corruption and greed and horrible people trying to do horrible things, that you just feel a little bit safer, a little bit more informed, so that you feel more at peace with your choices. If you do love scented candles made with nasty synthetic fragrance oils, be sure to check out the description of our live streams, because we have a discount code for our candles in there. Now, I've shared a lot of great information from a lot of great people who are way more educated than I am, but just coming from me, myself, as a person, the reason why I find this sort of messaging harmful is because we always try to promote the exact opposite messaging, that you don't have to look a specific way in order to feel a specific way. Your house doesn't have to look completely aesthetic. Your home is allowed to look live-in, because the reality of the clean aesthetic is that it's not a reality or easily accessible to a majority of people, because the ability to take care of your home on a regular basis sadly is a privilege in this day and age, with people having to work 1, 2, 3 jobs just to even keep their homes. People have kids, family responsibilities, work responsibilities. Not everyone has the time to completely devote their whole lives to the aesthetic. And that's the point I always just want to hammer home, is that you don't have to look a specific way to feel a specific way. Luxury is a mentality. It's not a brand, it's not a price tag, it's not an aesthetic, it's not the way anything looks or the optics of anything, it's how you feel on the inside. Because the things can be easily taken away from you like that. You never know what life is going to throw at you, but if you're solid in yourself and you feel luxurious and grand in yourself, then no one can ever take that from you. A lot of us are just trying to do our best. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you feel like you learned something. Feel free to drop a comment. We can discuss this more, because this is a very fascinating, very layered topic that I just wanted to bring a little bit of light to. So thank you for watching, and take care of yourself. Bye.